Dear fated friend, the concept of weak body in the Book of Changes may sound a bit mysterious, but in essence, it reveals the mental state of people in real life. The so-called weak body doesn't just refer to physical weakness. It's more about mental and emotional exhaustion. In the fast-paced life of modern society, all kinds of stress and anxiety are everywhere. Many people are consumed by the pursuit of external expectations and fall into a state of mental exhaustion from which they cannot escape. As the saying goes, the heart has 1,000 knots. Weak people often overthink. Their thoughts are confused, and their energy is scattered. This leads to a feeling of powerlessness and even helplessness in the face of problems. When faced with various pressures in life, many people cannot really relax. They always live in the expectations of others and the standards of society. The harder they try to keep up with the pace of the outside world, the easier it is to feel tired. Welcome to Audible Wisdom. We're on a journey of spiritual and physical growth. If you like my videos, please subscribe and you'll never get lost. I hope you'll plant the seed of wisdom and receive countless blessings. There's a saying, everyone has a destiny, and there's no escaping it. Everyone has different rhythms, opportunities, and circumstances. They don't have to be measured by the same standards. It's not that people with weak bodies can't be successful. On the contrary, they are often more thoughtful and can see things for what they are. But as the saying goes, too much is just as bad as too little. The biggest problem for those with a weak body is that they overthink and have serious internal consumption. This condition makes it difficult for them to act, and they fall into the quagmire of thinking. Therefore, the key to the problem is not the advantages and disadvantages of being strong or weak, but how to find a balance to keep a clear mind and avoid unnecessary consumption. So how do you regulate yourself under the pressure of modern society? How do you go from a weak body to a strong one? Or how to find a rhythm of life that suits you? That's what we're going to discuss. In order to understand what a weak body really is, we must first make one thing clear. Weakness is not just a physical problem. It's more of a mental and spiritual condition. Often weak people are not physically weak, but mentally tired. They often think too much, and their energy is spent on brooding and self-doubt. To put it simply, people with weak bodies are typically giants in thought and dwarfs in action. They have 1,000 ideas in their heads and even analyze them, but they can't take the first step. If this state continues, it leads to mental exhaustion and a vicious cycle. It's like running a marathon. Running fast doesn't necessarily mean you'll make it to the end. It's the consistency of the run that determines success or failure. Strong people may specialize in short bursts. They're quick to act without thinking. Weak people are better at long-term, deep thinking and making lasting, well-thought-out plans. Lao Tzu said, "The highest compassion is like water." The power of water is that it is soft, but it has the ability to last a long time and silently moisten things. This tells us that weakness is not a shortcoming. It can be an advantage if you can find a way to make it work for you. The problem, however, is that weak people tend to be trapped in their own limitations. They've thought it all out, but they hesitate to act because it's not perfect. This indecision causes them to waste their energy and time. In the end, nothing gets done. Weak people often think of all the possible consequences of failure before they start. This overthinking makes them afraid to act, and this inaction leads to self-doubt. Over time, they become more passive. Like many people, they may have the heart to start a business, but they are afraid to take the first step. Fear of failure, fear of inexperience, fear of not being able to handle unexpected challenges. Let's take another example. Some people, When they're in a relationship, always think about whether the other person is right for them, whether they're good enough, whether the relationship will last. As a result, they are consumed by their own doubts before they can really commit to the relationship. This kind of deep state of mind appears to be thoughtfulness, but it's actually a self-imposed limitation. It limits the possibility of action. So how do you get a weak person out of this predicament? There are two aspects that require special attention. The first is to minimize unnecessary internal conflicts. The second is to cultivate the courage to act. Internal consumption is actually the unnecessary use of energy. Psychological research shows that most of a person's daily energy expenditure is not due to physical activity, but to the brain. Those moments of repetitive thinking, inner conflict, and emotional entanglement are often more exhausting than physical work. Just as many people feel exhausted after a long day, even though they haven't done much physical work. The reason for this is mental conflict. To minimize internal conflict, we must first learn to accept ourselves. Accept your imperfections. Accept your current shortcomings. Stop judging yourself too harshly. People with weak bodies often fall into the trap of overthinking because they expect too much of themselves. As Zhuangzi said, rule by doing nothing. Sometimes letting go of the obsession with results can make things naturally move in a good direction. Second, reduce internal conflicts. It is also necessary to consciously reduce unnecessary interference. Taoism talks about blocking the opposite. In fact, it advocates reducing the influence of the outside world on the inner heart. If we're constantly distracted by outside information and our attention is diverted by trivial matters, our mental energy will be greatly depleted. For example, excessive use of social media, obsessing over other people's opinions, getting into pointless arguments. These are all signs of wasted energy. People with a weak body tend to be sensitive in their thinking and easily influenced by external factors. So you must learn to filter out these unnecessary distractions and focus on what's really important. Let's talk about the courage to act. The biggest problem for people with a weak body is that they lack the courage to act. You have a clear plan in your head, but you don't take the first step. The reason for this is fear of failure, fear of imperfection. At this time, what is most needed is to cultivate a learning by doing mentality. The ancients said that a journey of 100 miles begins with a single step. This means that the last step is often more difficult than the beginning. In fact, many things do not need to be started until you are 100% sure. The key is to make continuous adjustments and continuous progress during the process of action. If a person with a weak body waits until he's sure of everything before taking action, he often fails to achieve anything. In addition, to cultivate the power of action, you need to have the right amount of pressure. A strong body may be naturally motivated and not afraid of hard work. Weak people, on the other hand, often lack that drive and need to be pushed from the outside. For example, set a goal that's not too far away and give yourself a deadline. Or find someone who can supervise you. All these will help you take the first step. Action brings a sense of fulfillment. And that sense of accomplishment will further motivate you to take action. Only then can we break the vicious cycle of thinking, inaction, and internal wastage. Of course, people with weak bodies don't need to feel inferior just because they're weak. Lao Tzu said, "Weakness overcomes strength." Weakness is not failure. On the contrary, weakness can be a flexible strategy and a long-term advantage. Just like in a marathon, the fastest runner at the beginning may not be able to make it to the end. The real winners are those who know how to conserve their strength and keep moving forward. If a person with a weak body can realize the principle of using calmness as a brake at critical moments, they can often find their own rhythm in the midst of chaos. For example, some people are not the strongest in the workplace, but they are able to use their own subtle observation and steady style to win the trust of their bosses. And then, when the time comes, they hit the ground running. Another example is that those who really made it big in history, oftentimes, they were not the first to jump out of the gate. Rather, they were the ones who knew how to wait patiently and observe the right moment. Sun Tzu's The Art of War says, "Know yourself and know your enemy, and you will never be in danger in 100 battles." This ability to calmly observe and assess the situation is precisely the advantage of weak people. Weakness is not scary. The real question is how to turn that weakness into an advantage, to find a path of development that suits you. As long as you don't blindly follow the rhythm of the outside world, weak people can, through careful consideration, find a path to success that suits them. And once they break through the trap of internal conflict, the deeper they go, the more their potential explodes, bringing a qualitative leap forward. We can see that being weak is not an absolute disadvantage. The key is how to recognize and accept its existence, and turn it into an advantage in a reasonable way. As Lao Tzu said, "The highest compassion is like water. Water benefits all things without competition." Weakness and strength are not opposites, but can complement each other. If a weak person can find his own rhythm, reduce internal friction, and avoid unnecessary consumption, he can exert his strength for a long time and eventually reach a state of transcendence. In life, we face all kinds of pressures and external standards. But in the end, everyone's destiny is in their own hands. The most important thing is to find a pace that suits you. It's like a marathon. Some people are good at sprinting at the beginning. Some people are more comfortable going at an even pace. Different people have different strategies and methods. As long as you recognize your own pace, you'll eventually reach the finish line. Weakness is not scary. What's scary is not being able to recognize yourself and getting caught up in self-denial and endless thoughts. Once a person with a weak body is able to break through this layer of psychological constraints, stop overthinking and start taking action, they will realize that their potential is far greater than they ever imagined. As the ancients said, a blessing in disguise. Weakness and strength are just two sides of the same coin. Learning to accept your own weaknesses is actually the first step towards becoming stronger. Cognitive dissociation. First, we must cultivate a bystander mentality. When someone makes a judgment about us, try to step out of the situation for a moment. Observe your reaction as an outsider, rather than reacting immediately. Take an example. Suppose someone says you're not good enough. Your first reaction might be aggression, anger, or even self-doubt. But through cognitive dissociation, we realize that it's a personal opinion, not an objective fact. You can regard these negative comments as a cloud that passes by with the wind, instead of letting them take root in your heart. In addition to language, cognitive dissociation can be used in many of our everyday situations. For example, when we're caught up in a recurring emotion, try to look at these emotions as if we were standing on the sidelines. Not judging, not analyzing, just observing. For example, if you're feeling depressed, you might start thinking about why you're failing. Why are you such a failure? Why do others seem to be so successful, but you're always stagnating? At this point, using cognitive dissociation techniques, you can see that these thoughts are really just temporary. They don't last forever. They don't represent your true state of being. It's like a river, it's always moving forward. And emotions are just a temporary fluctuation. Let's look at a common life situation. Stress at work. Many people feel anxious at work, afraid that they will not live up to expectations, or that they won't be able to perform certain tasks. This stress often stems from our excessive pursuit of results. Cognitive dissociation can help us maintain a calm state of mind in these situations. You can imagine that you're a spectator, watching how you deal with these stresses. Notice your own inner turmoil and tension, but do not get caught up in it. As you go deeper into this observation, you'll gradually realize that these stresses are just temporary emotions. They don't have a fundamental impact on your life. Another important function of cognitive dissociation is to help us reduce rumination. Rumination means thinking about the same things over and over again, and it can even lead us into a negative cycle. It's a very common phenomenon in modern life. For example, on social media, when we see that other people's lives are more perfect than our own, we might wonder why we're not so lucky. We may even begin to question our own life choices. However, when we jump out of this cycle through cognitive dissociation, we can clearly recognize that someone else's life doesn't have to be our goal, and we don't need to compare our happiness with others. For those who like to tank, cognitive dissociation also has a unique meaning. Tanking does not mean being negative about life. Just like cats, they are always lazy and casual. They know how to find a balance between stress and relaxation. When we can stop being overly anxious about everything and play badly appropriately, we often find that life becomes easier. In fact, those who are weak need to learn how to minimize unnecessary internal conflict through cognitive dissociation and focus on the things that really matter. Success is often not achieved through hard work. Rather, it's a natural turnaround that occurs when you act in accordance with the situation. In our modern, fast-paced society, it's a rare ability to reduce the emotional burden of internal conflict. Cognitive dissociation not only helps us remain calm in the face of external judgment, it also allows us to focus on our inner peace. Whether it's anxiety at work, worry in life, or social insecurity, through cognitive dissociation, we can face them with a more relaxed state of mind. As the Taoists advocate, purity of the six senses. This is actually similar to positive thinking in psychology. We don't need to control every detail of our lives, nor do we need to be obsessed with the outcome. Instead, we learn to let go of the things we can't control and focus on the experience of the moment. Cognitive dissociation also allows us to better accept ourselves. We often suffer because we don't want to accept our mistakes and failures. But the truth is, these so-called flaws aren't really obstacles. They're part of what makes us who we are. Accepting ourselves doesn't mean we stop trying. Rather, it allows us to find more inner peace and acceptance, so that we can better cope with life's challenges. The ultimate goal of cognitive dissociation is to allow us to break free from the shackles of thinking and find a freer way of life. In this way, we are no longer burdened by external evaluations, nor fall into meaningless self-reflection, but can better control our emotions and life rhythm. It is like lighting a lamp in your heart, illuminating all thoughts, ideas, and emotions, but not being bound by them. Instead, you can easily see the coming and going of these thoughts. There are too many outside voices and comments from other people in life, especially in this era of information explosion. If weak people do not learn to block these external disturbances, they will inevitably get lost in these disturbances. So how should weak people tank to find their own rhythm in modern life and slowly recover? This is the topic we will discuss here. In order to talk about how to tank, we must first clarify a concept. Tanking is not a passive escape, but a wise approach to life. For a weak person, energy and time are very limited resources. Spending it on pointless arguments and endless socializing is simply exhausting. So the first step is to focus your energy inward. Focus more on yourself and less on the complexities of the outside world. A weak person's energy is already low, so he should use it sparingly. It's not necessary to pay attention to what others say or do in your daily life, especially in this age of information explosion. Everyone expresses their own opinion, but not every voice needs to be answered. Cell phones, computers, and other electronic devices are convenient, but they also drain our energy. It's important to reduce the amount of time we spend with these devices. It's important to learn to maintain inner peace. The principle of detachment also applies to human relationships. As the saying goes, everyone has their own desires. Everyone has their own way of life. Instead of being obsessed with other people's behavior, you should learn to let go, especially when it comes to people with bad character. The best choice is to stay away from them. We don't need to argue with people about their misdeeds. It's just an endless emotional battle. Relationships are complex by nature. If you feel that some relationships are too burdensome, it is not a bad thing to learn to cut them off decisively. On the contrary, it can make you feel more relaxed. Of course, life isn't just about relationships and external distractions. It's also about how you manage your time and energy. A weak body has limited energy. You should learn to spend your time doing things that are good for you. For example, read some of your favorite books. Increase your wisdom. Feed your soul. Books are food for the soul. Through reading, we can gain a broader perspective and a deeper inner peace. This is certainly a kind of nourishment for ourselves. At the same time, people with weak bodies should know how to enjoy the little happiness in life. For example, wear comfortable clothes and accessories that suit you. These seemingly simple things are actually replenishing energy for your body and mind. Everyone should learn to take care of themselves. It's important to nourish yourself both physically and spiritually. Such a lifestyle not only increases your sense of well-being, but also reduces unnecessary inner conflict. It is worth mentioning that tanking is not giving up, but a wise way of letting go. For people with weak bodies, tanking is a way to adjust their own condition. We have to learn to let everything happen and accept all possible outcomes. We don't have to be too obsessed with temporary gains and losses. You can't always control what happens in life. Instead of spending a lot of energy fighting for things that don't belong to us, it's better to go with the flow and keep a peaceful mind. As the saying goes, as long as there are green mountains, you will never run out of firewood. As long as you keep your body and mind healthy, anything is possible. When it comes to work and study, even the weak must know how to make choices. If getting a license or learning a skill makes you feel unhappy, why don't you put it aside for a while and keep your mind strong? In this fast-paced society, too many people sacrifice their bodies for the sake of so-called success. This is definitely not worth the effort. Weak people should know how to take a break. Avoid excessive fatigue and internal wear and tear. Both the body and the mind need rest. Only when they are in good condition can you realize your goals. For relationships and emotional problems, weak people should adopt a tanking attitude. This does not mean indifference or avoidance, but learning to let go at the right time. Relationships between people are often full of conflict and entanglement, but not every conflict needs to be resolved by us. Learn to accept your imperfections. Allow yourself to be at an emotional low point sometimes. That way we can recover better. It doesn't matter what others think of us. What matters is how we see ourselves. Tanking is actually a form of self-protection. that allows us to let go of unnecessary attachments. It reduces your anxiety so that you can better face the challenges of life. Many people may think that tanking is a negative attitude or even a sign of being extremely bad. But it's actually a wise way to live. Only by learning to tank can you find your own rhythm in the complexity of life. And in the process, you can slowly regain your experience and vitality. Many of life's problems are caused by our own demands and our obsession with the outside world. As the old saying goes, a happy heart makes a healthy body. Only by letting go of inner anxiety and keeping a peaceful heart can we face life's various challenges with ease. I hope that every weak person can find his own rhythm of life, keep his own energy, and finally achieve his own nirvana rebirth. Dear fated friends, I'm grateful that you are here. If you are inspired by what I've shared with you today, please respond by liking this post and leave a message. We all have our destiny. It resonates with the soul. May all sentient beings soon attain enlightenment. Be peaceful, happy, and free. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do so and we will make a deeper connection. May you forward this message to spread wisdom and good deeds. You'll be blessed with immense merit, and your wisdom will increase.